Can you tell me a little bit about that move from B2C to B2B and how important it is for Dropbox now?
Yeah, it's a big move. As we said, we currently have 500 million users. We're actually adding 10 million users overall per month. So the growth is still very, very high. And about 2 years ago, we started really focusing on B2B. So Drew pulled the first engineers together to start building a B2B product. And right now we have, you probably know the products Basic and Pro that we use for consumers. But then for the B2B side, we have Dropbox Business, Dropbox Enterprise, and we have many customers in the education space like MIT, or yesterday I spoke to University Cambridge. So we have an education SKU for these customers. And for me, it's very interesting to work with these B2B customers because I feel that we have, in a way, a very special software model. We've seen it in the past in other product categories where users started to bring the tools that they use at home in their private life. They start to bring them into work. 2007, the iPhone came out. Everybody was on BlackBerry. I was in the telco business after that, or Nokia. But users said, look, I love this device. I would like to use it in all of my life, not part of my life. And basically we see the same thing with Dropbox. And it's a very different approach because we go to large companies and very often they have 10,000 or even 20,000 people already using Dropbox without having a B2B contract. And the question is really, why is that? And we then start talking to these users and we try to find out, okay, why are you doing this? Because your company usually has invested in storage, in infrastructure, and still these users are choosing Dropbox. So they're trying to solve a pain and find a better way of working. They're trying to simplify their working life and shift that 60% to 40% and actually spend more time on the actual work. And we see that the traditional software model is very different. The CIO buys software. Very often it's a 3-year project or 5-year project. They build big business cases. Then it's being rolled out. It takes a lot of time. And then the job really starts because now they have to convince the employees to start using the product and to start working in a different way. And with us, it's almost the other way around. We go to the CIO and say, okay, a lot of people are already using the product. And therefore, there's no big adoption time. By the way, your help desk won't get any calls. And you will see the returns very quickly. And I have to say, on a daily basis, it changes the way companies work and public services work. And I find that quite cool.
And what's really taken off in recent years is people telling people about what they like and what they want to use, and this whole notion of virality. And that has really driven Dropbox growth. People used it, they loved it, they told their friends about it, their friends used it, and that's how it's ended up in so many businesses, and so many of us use it both in work and at home. It also ties in with this consumerization of IT that Philippe referred to. So the workforce is changing and how we work is changing. And people are demanding devices, software, apps that they know and love.
We're talking about employees there and you know, work and how it has changed and all the rest of it. But I suppose something that keeps us all awake at night is the customer experience and how do you keep customers happy. And so I'd love to hear from both of you a little bit about your lessons in Dropbox and how do you get that customer experience right?
I think it started, or at least when I joined Dropbox, Arash and Drew were still doing customer support tickets. Not all day, every day, and Drew mentioned a little bit about how to scale the business. But when I joined, there was a very strong culture of you're not joining to lead a function, you're joining to understand the customers. And I spent 6 weeks in training, getting trained like anybody else on my team. And I was given quotas of tickets to do with customers, calls to take with customers. I will never forget my first call. It was a nightmare, and I handed it over to someone on my team because I didn't really know how to answer it properly. But from the very start of Dropbox, the fact that Drew and Arash answered support tickets really meant that they understood where customers were tripping up, what they wanted, what features they were looking for. And it really has led to a simple and easy to use product.
We live in a society where we're all about, it's all about recommending. So customers listen to other customers. To Adrienne's point, my strong conviction is customer experience is everybody's job. When you're in recruitment, when you're in finance, when you're in sales, we're all responsible for the customer and make the customer successful. We live by the customer.
Makes sense. Well, I mean, you had two innovators at the top who founded the company. How do you drive innovation, you guys managing your teams over this side of the world?
When I think about innovation, I think about culture. I think it's something that is, you live and breathe it. And Drew actually very accurately described culture as something that's very difficult to define. So when I think about innovation, I think about giving people and teams room to think, time to think and room to think. In Dropbox we have something called, and it's quite an institution now, Hack Week. And so it's a week where the company basically stops doing the day-to-day work and does hacky things. So obviously it has its origins from our engineering roots. But this is spread to the sales teams, the CX teams, the finance teams. Everybody downs tools in as much as they can, and we come together, we do very creative things. And many of our new features, many new processes or internal things have come about because different people sat down, played together, thought together, and went off and were able to spend some time on that. So creating space for people to think, I think, is super important. Brainstorming, allowing people to have stupid ideas, because I've often found I'll throw out ideas and most people roll their eyes and think, oh, here we go, she's on one now. But actually, if you let people build on those, then often something good can come out of what seems like a really bad start. And the other thing in terms of culture, I would say, is freedom to fail. I think sometimes what often happens with innovation is people are afraid to experiment, or they're afraid to test because what if it doesn't work? What if I put a bet on something, this isn't successful, I'm going to suffer because of that. And I think from the top down, having that freedom to fail is super important as well.
Two questions in a way, I suppose. Next, I want to ask you, your global expansion is being headed up here in Dublin. So I want to ask you first of all why Dublin was chosen as the international HQ, and then moving on from that, I want to ask you a little bit about sourcing that talent as you expand throughout Europe. So maybe start with you, Adrienne, about the why Dublin question, and then maybe moving on to Philippe.
Okay, so I'm going to speak to the converted when I say why Dublin, right? Warm audience here. I think I always say there were three reasons. First was talent, the second was talent, and the third was talent. Many of you in the room work in multinationals. Many of you work with multinationals and a variety of other companies. Ireland has a fantastic workforce, educated workforce. We have huge multilingual talent. And this is, it was such an obvious choice for us when we came looking. When I think more beyond talent, I think Ireland, I might be biased, but Ireland is a relatively easy place to do business. So it's very well for me to say that, but I need to hear that from my US colleagues and from the people, the landing team that first arrived here and said, hey, this is great. So we have great support and great working relationship with the IDA and even Enterprise Ireland and other support structures. And that brings me to the third reason that is crucial for us here is the support networks. So we, as soon as we landed in Dublin, immediately people reached out, people invited us to events like this, we were able to network. And now whenever I have a problem or a challenge up against, there are a number of people that I can go to straight away and say, hey, how did you guys solve this? How did you guys do this? Hey, who did you use to decorate your office? And just build up that type of a network.
And Philippe, that expanding then out across Europe and sourcing that talent.
Yeah, so we have here, we serve a lot of the market with 25 nationalities actually here, including Saudi, Middle East, Scandinavian. So it's great when you walk in the morning, 8:30, and the first language you hear is Spanish in your Dublin office. But that's great. But then we also started offices around Europe. So we're now in London, Paris, Hamburg, Amsterdam, and Tel Aviv. We have an engineering team in Tel Aviv. And we do that when we feel that the markets are getting more mature. We're starting to win more customers. And then we just need to be closer to customers. As we said, we spoke before about customers trust us, so we want to then be close by. And you want to understand the local nuances of the countries. Having lived in Germany, for example, I'm close to the importance of data privacy over there. So I have a sense for what that means. Last Friday, I was in Paris, and we were looking for partners to work on customers, and the local people don't know then what the right partners are. So you need to have the local knowledge and the local sensitivity to branch out. So we'll keep doing that as we keep growing.
And the obvious question that I'm always going to ask, but that element of diversity and ensuring you have diverse teams, and I'll come back to you, Adrienne. But Philippe, what I mean, I know it's something that's quite dear to Drew's heart, for example. But I mean, how do you tackle that?
Yeah, diversity. You gotta have to believe that. You gotta be convinced how important this is. I believe in the meritocracy of ideas, and the ideas will be more diverse when the team is more diverse. And it sometimes can be a bit harder to really build a diverse team because you can't go to your usual networks. But the merits are very high, and I think it starts with a conviction. Diverse team will always come up with the more creative ideas. And then we're back to innovation.
And yourself, Adrienne?
Right. I was just going to add that it's back to the innovation. So different people, different perspectives, different ideas really helps innovation. I mean, there's a lot that businesses can do practically. Anything from looking at recruitment and keeping an eye. I think one of the things that I've learned is when you measure stuff and when you keep an eye on metrics and numbers and so on, people pay attention to it. So we're very thoughtful about paying attention to our recruiting pipeline, how many diverse candidates. And I should say diversity means lots of things in lots of different countries, so it could be along various different axes. So we pay attention to those numbers, what's happening, what could we do more of, and that's really changed some of our business practice when I think about hiring. Internally, we do a lot to promote diversity with our own internal events and our own internal networks, but then also practically from a business perspective, we look at diversity in terms of performance. If you're doing annual reviews or looking at promotions, again, just keeping an eye on the data and making sure that it looks as it should. And if not, looking into that and deep diving or double clicking on that and doing something about it.
Fantastic. I'm not going to keep you much longer because I know people are dying to network. I heard the chatting before we came on, so I'm assuming that's going to continue. But I do kind of want to wrap up. You both have very significant CVs behind you. I want to ask both of you maybe to leave the leaders in the room here with maybe one lesson that you guys have learned through your careers, one business lesson that applies no matter what size, whether you're a multinational or a small company or a medium company.
Yeah, maybe not that original, but hire people with potential that is at least as good or better than yourself, and you'll have an easier life.
I'm going to be slightly more wordy, but for me, the business lesson, I'll have to probably explain it, is business is about people. We often think about technologies, of spaces, products, revenue, but actually it is always about people, and whether people are in your teams, in your organization, whether they're partners or suppliers, or for me, I deal a lot with customers. What I've really learned to do, which is different to how I started my career, where when I had goals and objectives, my main objective was to figure out how to get people out of the way so that I could achieve what I needed to achieve. And what I actually figured out along the way is that actually, if I don't try and move people out of the way, if I listen to them and I stand in their shoes and I hear their perspective, then often I might change my plans and my output is often an awful lot better. In fact, it's sometimes quite innovative because I've actually listened to people. So business is about people is my key lesson.